Cheer up, Henry. It wasn't your fault. Ice and snow caused the accident. I'm sending you to Crew, a fine place for sick engines. They'll give you a new shape and a larger firebox. You'll feel a different engine, and you won't need special coal anymore. Won't that be nice? Yes, sir, said Henry.
The Flying Kipper is a Thomas & Friends classic. Of course, it's also a classic Thomas & Friends episode, but that goes in two different ways. Of course, the episode alone is very memorable for everything that happens in it and just for being overall beautiful. Just look at these shots. Are you kidding me? That's some S-rank, everything, but also in the fact that this episode is based directly off a book from the Reverend W. Awdry, also being titled The Flying Kipper. It's pretty obvious and pretty fair to say that this episode and story really sticks out. In the episode, the accident is portrayed pretty graphically, but not in a bad way, more in a, oh, wow. Much like how in A Better View for Gordon we would see the first time Sir Topham Hatt or a crew would get hurt in any situation, I would argue that this is the first time that we really see an engine get hurt in a crash. So much so that, as you all saw, Henry ends up getting sent to Crew to be overhauled. Of course, that's not the only reason that Henry was sent to Crew. It's known and said in the show that Henry has a lot of problems. It's said that he wasn't built right and can only perform well with special Welsh coal. So it's more accurate to say that this was the tipping point for Sir Topham Hatt to send him to get his overhaul. Henry, of course, would come back with a larger firebox and a new shape. Overall, a new engine and feeling in the best shape that he's ever been in. Truly a heartwarming, just wonderful tale. Kinda sucks that he had to go through this for Sir Topham Hatt to be like, yeah, it's time. Not only that, but there are 3 people in the brake van that Henry inevitably, destroys. And of course, they get out just in time. But could you imagine? That would be a great bonus episode. Basically, due to the snow that had recently fallen on the tracks, a switch on Henry's line ends up getting locked up. Of course, the snow weighs down on the signal arm and Henry doesn't know. Because of this, Henry would end up continuing down the line and run into the back of another train. Not his best or happiest story, but it works out in the end. There were accidents before this, but I would argue that they weren't really as heavy. For example, there is James's accident in Thomas and the Breakdown Train, which is a classic as well. And while it is implied that James is hurt, it's not implied that he needs an entire, overhaul. And that's what makes me think this episode was more of a first in terms of the engines really getting hurt in an accident. At least in a way that really shows. Of course, being a classic Reverend W. Awdry story, it is inspired by real life events. You also read the title and pressed on, you know this, you know that. You know why we're here. And thanks to your all's recommendations and some tips, I was actually able to find out a little bit more information on what exactly the event was. And thanks to your guys' help, that's what we're going to get into today. The Abbots Ripton rail accident would take place on January 21st in 1876. Just like in the Flying Kipper, snow and ice would be a growing problem on the Great Northern Railway. In the accident, the special Scotch Express train would collide with a coal train during a blizzard. Following this, an express train traveling in the other direction would run into the wreckage. The initial accident itself was caused by over-reliance on signals and block working, as well as a systematic signal failure in the adverse conditions of the snow. To basically put that in English, just like in the Flying Kipper, snow had been weighing down on the signals, and visibility was limited due to the snow. The collision would involve 3 locomotives. 13 people would end up losing their lives. Another 53 people would end up injured. The accident itself and the inquiry into it led to a fundamental change in the British railway signaling practice, to this day remaining one of the worst and most unfortunate collisions in the history of railways and railroads. A coal train preceding the Flying Scotsman on the main East Coast line was normally scheduled to be shunted into a siding at Abbots Ripton. This would allow the much faster Flying Scotsman to pass. However, because of the snowstorm, both the coal train and Flying Scotsman were running late. The signalman at home, the next station north of Abbots Ripton, judged that the coal train needed to go into the siding at home if it was not to delay the Flying Scotsman. He therefore would set his signal levers to danger as to stop the coal train, but it would continue on the main line until reaching Abbots Ripton. Using a hand lamp, the signalman would wave the locomotive to shunt. The goods train had nearly completed shunting when the Scotch Express would run into it with some speed. The wreckage would obstruct the down line. A second collision would occur some minutes later, when a northbound express train to Leeds would crash into the wreckage. 13 passengers would die in the collisions, and 53 passengers and 6 train crew members would also be injured. The weight of the snow on the arm of the signal, or perhaps ice building up on the signal's wires, had meant that when the signalman had put the levers to all danger, the signals would not fully move into the danger position. In normal conditions, signalmen could see the signals that they were controlling. However, in the snowstorm, they could not. The southbound coal train had left Peterborough about 18 minutes late, therefore with 12 minutes less of a lead than normal on the Flying Scotsman. It progressed steadily to Abbots Ripton, where it was stopped by the signal box. Under the instructions of the signalman, the coal train will begin to shunt. The signalman would urge the driver to hurry up. claiming that he was keeping the Scotchman standing at Wood Walton, being the previous signal box. As stated before, the signalman at home had been concerned that because the coal train was so late, if it went on to Abbott's Ripton before shunting into a siding, the Flying Scotsman would be delayed. To avoid this, he had decided to stop the train at home and put it into a siding there. He would set his signals to danger. However, when the coal train arrived at home, it would not stop. He telegraphed to Abbott's Ripton that the train had run past the signals, and told the station master at home that the train had disobeyed them. The home station master told the inquiry that he would then send for plate layers. Whilst waiting for them, he would check the upline home signal and saw that it would be set to danger. However, when a down express went through, he would notice that one of the signals did not go to danger. The plate layers had to be sent for because they had been allowed to go home at the end of their normal working day, despite the weather. Their foreman was uneasy about this, however, and would come out of his house to watch the up-distant signal while two trains went past. The first of these was the Manchester Express, running about 13 minutes behind the Scotsman. The second, a slow-stopping passenger train, a further 6 minutes behind. As he feared, the signal showed a white light throughout. He put his work clothes back on and went to the signal. The arm was weighed down with snow, and once he had shaken this off by working the arm up, it would then show a red light. He then walked to the station. On his way, he met a plate layer dispatched to the distant signal by the station master. The Scotch Express would leave Peterborough about 6 minutes late. It wouldn't slow down speed for the bad weather. It would pass through home at about 6:37 with the signal showing all clear. It would arrive at Wood Walton at 6:40. The signalman there had set his signal levers to danger, and had done this to protect the shunting at Abbott's Ripton. However, he did not set his levers to set detonators at the home signal, nor did he supplement his fixed signals by displaying a hand lamp from the signal box. He told the inquiry he was busy stopping a train of empty coal wagons on the downline, and because of this, as well as the weather, he did not hear the express until it ran past his cabin at full speed. It would hit the coal train going at full speed, about 40 to 45 miles per hour. Some coal wagons would end up smashed, but the coal train engine itself was largely unscathed. The express train would derail and veer off to the right. It ended up lying on its side, beyond the downline. Its tender and two passenger carriages would also obstruct the downline. The railway workers involved were badly shaken. Some would admit it took them a few minutes to fully gather their wits. But the guards whose duty it was to protect their train were affected to a lesser extent. The guard of the express would walk back the upline, towards Wood Walton, laying fog signals on the rails to warn any further trains to stop. Despite the signal showing all clear, the Manchester Express would stop in response to the Wood Walton signalman using a hand lamp to show a red light from his signal box. It finally pulled up beyond the Wood Walton down distant signal. The Abbott's Ripton up distant signal could be seen up ahead showing the white all clear. It then proceeded cautiously towards Abbott's Ripton. The train will be stopped constantly, first by the Scotsman guard waving a red hand lamp and then by a plate layer. Eventually it would draw up on the rear of the wrecked Scotsman. The Abbott's Ripton signalman was evidently dazed by the events. He would set his signals in both directions to danger, but did not immediately send the 5-beat obstruction danger bell signal to Stukely, that being the next signal box south. Instead, he would try to telegraph Huntingdon, thus trying to report the crash and seeking assistance. He would continuously try to raise Huntingdon, but the signalman did not answer, as he refused to accept any messages not starting with a code to indicate the time sent. He would rebuke with an MQ code roughly translating as, "Go away, I'm busy." And indeed he was, as he was accepting the Leeds Express and passing it on to the next signal box. At 6:52, after trying and failing for 8 minutes to pass his message, the Abbott's Ripton signalman would send the 5-beat obstruction danger bell to Stukely. The down Leeds Express would pass through Huntingdon at 6:49. The Abbott's Ripton down signal was showing all clear, and the Leeds Express would approach it at full speed. Still traveling at full speed, the Leeds Express would plow through the tender and the carriages blocking the line. This, rather than the first collision, is when most of, if not all of the deaths are thought to have occurred. The inquiry in court would overall blame snow and ice for the events that had taken place. However, after the accident, the GNR would adopt a significantly different design of signals, that being a semaphore or a somersault signal. The modern practice of the default position for signals being danger was also adopted, and railway companies were required by law to make an annual return to the Board of Trade on what fraction of their passenger rolling stock was fitted with continuous brakes. Over a larger timescale, continuous braking will be fitted to all passenger trains. That and the all clear was indicated by a green light, so that a broken red lens or one out of position would no longer give false reassurance. The Board of Trade would have no regulatory powers to enforce the recommendations of the inquiry report, the most important being improving signals so that they would work in the frost and snow, keeping signals normally at danger, the use by signalmen of hand lamps in bad weather to confirm the indications of fixed signals, the provision of telegraph apparatus in all signal boxes, the improvement of braking systems on all trains, as well as the suspension of less important trains and the reduction in speed of other trains in severe weather conditions. I don't know if it's just me, but basically everything that was just said there was common sense, or should be on a railway. It's sad that this had to happen for these basic rules to be taken seriously. Just like the accident in the original episode of the Flying Kipper, the real story behind it is quite intense. While the original Flying Kipper accident doesn't involve a 3-train pileup, it's still very interesting to see the real-life inspiration that they took in taking and making this story. Everybody loved how seriously the crash itself was portrayed in the original episode. It's even more interesting to find out what inspired that episode, and in most cases, unfortunately, oftentimes a lot more sad, but still. It's not like this information ruined this episode for me, but it definitely adds a little bit more of a different dimension to it. Already considered a darker episode, when you figure out the real-life dark counterparts of what really happened, it makes it even more so. But even still, in my opinion, this episode is still one of the most visually appealing. That and the happy ending is always going to be a heartwarmer. It's always great to see that, you know, our boys end up okay. At some point. Though the original situation the episode is drawn from is dark, I have to commend the show for, again, being able to take this heavy situation and, you know, dumb it down for kids. I don't think any of us would have any idea, as kids watching this, the real, true, and crazy story behind it. We didn't even have to think about it. What happened to Henry was honestly, you know, sad enough. But as I've said before and I'll say again, being able to have this information now as an adult and rewatching this, it really makes you appreciate it just a little bit more. It's evident through this and through different situations in Thomas that it would treat its fan base very maturely for its age. And it's finding out information like this that really adds to that. Because of this, there will always be something to appreciate in these classic Thomas and Friends episodes. More than just being called classic makes them so. And it's almost like the more information we find out about these episodes, the more special they can become to us. The Flying Kipper, of course, is no exception. If there's anything else you guys would like to see me talk about, be sure to let me know down in the comments. This video wouldn't have been possible without your guys' recommendations and help, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. And even more so, thank you guys for continuing to support this series. So many of you commented asking to see the real story of the Flying Kipper and giving me the information I would need to find it, as well as a bunch of other recommendations and ideas, and I can't thank you guys enough for it. It's always a blast being able to bring you guys the content that you want to see. Again, if you guys have any more recommendations, be sure to let me know down in the comments, and hopefully you guys like taking a look at the true story of the Flying Kipper.